Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our next GoFly Master Lecture. In this webinar, we'll be talking about press and media. It's my pleasure once again to welcome GoFly CEO and founder, Gwen Leiter.
Thanks, Nidhi, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you all know, GoFly is sponsored by Boeing as our grand sponsor, along with several other corporate sponsors and in-kind sponsors, including Pratt & Whitney. And as well as our organizational partners, over 20 different aerospace organizations around the world. So today we are very pleased to have a master lecture on telling your story for both press and media. And today we will feature our GoFly communications team. And as you all know, we are here to help you tell your stories. As you are very busy right now working on your technical builds, press and publicity can aid you by helping to legitimize what you are doing and bring in additional partners and sponsors and funding partners as well. So it can certainly add to your success in that way. So we have Sarah today to outline different ways of interacting with the press, of telling your story, and to branding yourselves on a global stage. So without further ado, let's welcome Sarah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gwen. Let's pull up this presentation here. So again, what we're talking about today is the press landscape and how to really tell your story with press and media. As some of you may know, we as GoFly are trying to help spread some of your stories on our owned channels, on our blog, on social. But what we want this webinar to do today is also give you the tools to feel comfortable in reaching out to media and helping to tell your own story. So really what we're talking about today is storytelling. The best way to tell your story to press is to come at it as the source of this great story. Everyone participating in GoFly and participating in phase 2 is part of a much bigger story that's going on in the marketplace. We as the GoFly communications team are really looking at some of the international, national, mainstream press, some of these bigger and broader stories. Today, we're really going to talk about local press and how we think that you can kind of harness that power to tell your local community that you are part of this much bigger competition and how impressive that really is. So let's first start with the current media landscape. Where are we? What's actually happening there? How do you approach it? So first off, the first thing I want to point out is that reporters are busy. This, of course, is not to say that everyone is not busy. Again, as competitors in GoFly, we know that many of you are working on this outside of your regular jobs and really have put in a ton of time and investment into this. The reason that it's so important for reporters is because the entire media landscape has kind of changed in the past few years. Essentially what has happened is newsrooms are growing smaller and reporters are expected to have more 24/7 coverage on just about everything. So what this means is that reporters are getting thousands of story ideas in their inboxes or phone calls or just pitched to them every single day. What that means for you when you're thinking about approaching press is that you really need to figure out a way to stand out and how to really get their attention there. So the second half of the slide kind of speaks to that. Your story should really grab the reporter that you're trying to hit and match what that reporter is covering normally. This usually means, you might be talking to an aviation reporter who is covering the space. You also might just be talking to a local business reporter who is covering happenings in the community and that kind of thing. So it's really important to remember that when you're approaching press so you can keep your story pretty concise and compelling from the get-go. So what do reporters actually want? Oops, excuse me, going back and forth with my slides. Reporters are essentially just looking for a good story. They want to tell a good story so their readers are more likely to read it and be engaged. So what that means for you is what part of your story is most unique, what's most compelling. In this sense, this might be a particular part of your device that is really new and innovative. It might be the origin of your team and how you set about putting it together. It might even be some challenges that you had to overcome to get to this next stage. One thing that we do want to caution you is that we don't necessarily need to give, or you do not need to give, or should not give away your secret sauce in everything and all of your technical proprietary information there. Their reporters are much more looking for the story. So you can tell that story without having to get into some of those really confidential details. They're also looking for a reliable source. They don't necessarily want to speak to me as a communications professional. They want to speak to the people who are on the ground and doing the work. So they really want to hear from you and what you're doing to get to this new evolution in flight. They also are looking for a distinct point. What that usually means is just to be authentic to yourself. You want to bring something to the table that connects with reporters. This also kind of goes to the next point, which is a real person to support a real storyline. Another part that is really compelling for reporters is just connecting your story to the bigger picture. So for us, it's really providing context on why something matters or what your role in the GoFly competition could have on the rest of the industry. So really, it's part of being a bigger part of this community that could really have impact on the way that we move, the way that we work, the way that we live. Or perhaps it could just be a technological advancement that you find within your experimentation and your development that could have impact down the road. Making that connection to reporters is sometimes really important for them to understand the bigger picture. Lastly, we have in here visuals. Most of the time, reporters are going to be looking for some sort of supplemental resource or asset to help illustrate their story. And this is also a product of the media landscape. When they are publishing their stories, oftentimes they push it to social media or a digital version of their newspaper or publication. And to really get people to click on it, a strong visual can really make or break a story sometimes. Now, one caveat there, again, we don't want you to feel like you need to give any sort of visual of your prototype or of your personal flying device. And we do not believe that you should give anything that, again, would give away what makes your product really unique. That visual could also take the form of a headshot, a picture of your teammates or your team, or even just a visual of your workspace, or maybe a very small close-up of your device that wouldn't really give a ton away. Overall, you should just be prepared for that question of the reporter asking if there's anything else that you can share to, again, help kind of support the story. Next slide. Sorry for the delay here. Okay, now I'm going back and forth, excuse me. All right. Excuse me while I get that back in presenting form. Okay, so once you've kind of figured out what your story is, what you've determined the reporter would really find compelling about your particular story, you want to think about your actual outreach. And there's a couple different things that go into this. Number one, who are you looking to speak to? It's really important to research and identify the reporter that you want to speak with, because we know that they're very busy and we know that they have a ton of emails coming through, a ton of pitches. They might just be skimming it. So you want to make sure that the person that you do end up reaching out to is someone who might have covered something similar in the past, and making sure that your story fits into their general beat. If it doesn't and you just email a random reporter, they might just delete your email. So for many of the teams, this is going to be a local business reporter, perhaps even a lifestyle reporter at your local paper, your local newspaper. In some cases, in some markets, there are people who have blogs about aviation or aerospace or kind of more technical blogs. That could be a good fit for you as well. So after you have found that person, how do you actually reach out to them? Essentially, most of this stuff can really be found online. Many reporters list their contact information in their Twitter bios, or you can find it through a Google or other search, but this might take a few tries. And I would encourage you, if you at first do not succeed, don't worry, there are ways to find the right person. If you are unable to find the exact reporter's contact email or contact information, it's absolutely okay to reach out to the publication and state that you want to talk to a certain reporter and you have a story that you think could work for a certain section, and could they direct you in that area. Most of the time, editors or someone that you might get in contact with will happily push you to the right person, and you're more likely to get a response than if you just pitched your idea to the wrong reporter. That being said, I've said email a few times because we find through my experience, email is usually the best for that first conversation. Oftentimes then it will move to a phone or perhaps even an in-person interview, but first contact, usually reporters like it to be via email. So you found your reporter, you figured out how to contact them. What do you actually say? First off, we remember that, again, reporters are probably skimming, so we want to keep it short, keep it concise, and really think about the things that make you unique, that you can talk about that don't necessarily give the whole farm away. You also want to make sure that in your email, in your introductory email, you are asking the reporter for a following action. Most of the time, that is just a follow-up interview, but you kind of want to lay out, is it something about your design that you want to talk about? Is it about your journey? Do you maybe just want to profile the team? What is the actual ask? So on the next slide, we have a basic template here. Again, every story is going to be different. Every team is going to have a different story to tell. Oftentimes, you might have a different way of approaching reporters. But this is a general template that kind of encompasses what we think could be the story that most teams can start out with. And that is essentially that you are a team participating in this giant 2-year, $2 million international competition that is supported by some huge names in aerospace, like Boeing, like Pratt & Whitney, by a host of our other organizational partners. That's a big deal. And your local press should be excited about highlighting a local member of the community who is participating in this bigger competition that has impact on the entire aviation industry, and may even impact the future of cities, of work, of how we live in general. So then you want to bring it to the present. What are you doing right now? Right now, we know that many teams are deep in the development of their personal flying devices. This is a great time to kind of tell that story, tell part of where you are in that journey, and explain any obstacles you have to overcome, or even talk about why you decided to join in the first place. Here's where, if you have any kind of exciting details about maybe something unique about your team or how it was put together, that's the time to share it. Lastly, again, you want to end with the ask. Would the reporter be interested in a quick, maybe phone interview to chat this out and see if they're interested? That should give you a general idea of how you can kind of build off of that and make it your own. So, okay, let's say that you have already found your reporter, you figured out your story, you're signed up for an interview. What do you actually need to do to prepare for that? There's a couple things that we really like to think about before getting on the phone with a reporter. The first and the most important is to really, again, think of this as a story. I keep repeating that because it's a really important part of how you interact with press. You really don't want it to feel very transactional. You shouldn't think of it really as a question and answer period. It really should be a conversation between you and another person who's interested in something that you're doing. You don't want to just answer questions. You want to really think of it as this is an opportunity to share your story with the world. So you really think about what you want to say and the few key areas you want to hone in on. The second part, obviously, we want you to feel prepared and to feel confident going into this. The best way to do that is really just to review, once again, who your reporter really is and what they normally write about. This can be really important in how you tell your story, because if your reporter that you're talking to is not very well versed in the aviation space, you're going to want to take a step back and make sure that you pause, make sure that they understand the big innovation happening here, and make sure that you're kind of talking to them on their level. If, on the other hand, the reporter you're talking to specifically covers aerospace, aviation, or sometimes even technical aspects, they might have a much better understanding of the more technical parts of it, and that way you can kind of get into that a little bit more. You should always go into every interview assuming zero knowledge on the side of the reporter. And this might be because the reporter either hasn't had a second to review and might just be jumping on the call and will need a quick refresher, or again, maybe they're not as close to the industry as you are. The other two things that we want to talk about during an interview is to be memorable. Again, reporters are busy. You want to really make yourself stand out. The best way to do that is to create a real connection between the reporter and yourself by establishing that human connection. Reporters are also people. We have to remind people of that sometimes. They really want to connect with you. And more than that, that human connection and that kind of real personal element can really help them tell a story in a better way that their audience will also connect with. So the most important thing there is to remember to be yourself. They are talking to you because you are the person building this device, and you are the person that is the most interesting part of this story. So remember that as you're going through this process. The last thing when you're on an interview to be aware of is that there really is no such thing as being off the record. Even massive CEOs of technical companies and experts who've done 1,000 media interviews sometimes get caught up in the subtleties of being on the record or off the record. So essentially, there is no off the record. You should assume that anything that you say could be used in print. If you don't want to see something in print, that's why just don't say it at all. And that's not to be overly worrisome about that. It's just really important to know that you do want to tell a good story. You do want to share some of the most compelling parts of your story, but you do not want to give away everything. And there are parts of your device that you will probably want to keep private so that you don't, so that you do have that edge. The last thing that I will say in that section is also to just be aware that it's okay to not answer every question. So if you feel like you're getting into territory that you're not comfortable sharing, or even if you are only partway along in your development of your device and you just feel like you're not ready to answer something, it is absolutely okay to let the reporter know that you will follow up with them. You don't feel comfortable answering that particular question right now, or even that you don't necessarily know and you can follow up with them. They're used to that type of thing, and it is more than okay to follow up with them after the phone interview or the in-person interview to send them more information. Also on that note, you can always reach out to GoFly. At the end of this, I'll provide an email address where you can reach out to. But if there's any question that is more directed to GoFly as a competition that you do not feel comfortable answering at the time, we can always jump in and follow up with the reporter for you. So you've already done a lot of work. How do you actually spread all of that work that you've done and spread your story? After the interview, you want to find that article and really share it with the world. Some of the best ways to do that is through social media. So we've kind of laid out a few steps here on just how to establish your presence on social media. This is very basic, but should kind of give you an idea of where to start. We know that many of the teams have already established a presence on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, a couple other sites, and they continue to tag us, which is great, and we love to see that. So when you're thinking about how to share this, oftentimes it's important to think which platform would work the best for you. For Twitter, it's a really great platform for sharing quick updates. It's easy to engage in real-time conversations. And when I say that, I mean you can retweet other people who are talking on Twitter. You can follow some of our partner organizations and see what they're talking about. You can comment. It's a really good way to really kind of engage with that bigger community. On Facebook, Facebook is a great resource to share content because it really supports a diverse number of formats. And that, again, kind of refers to visuals, videos, other content that really makes your story compelling, that might be a little bit more visual oriented. Facebook is also important because at the moment it seems to reach the widest community. And lastly, Instagram we have on here. This is primarily for sharing visual updates. If you're not at a stage where you feel like you have a lot to share visually, you don't need to be on Instagram. It might not be the right fit for you. So once you've established your presence there, you want to engage the community on there. You want to follow other thought leaders. You want to follow experts. You want to use some hashtags like aviation, or you want to tag our sponsors, Boeing, Pratt & Whitney, some of our other partners. You also want to retweet and really participate in that community. And lastly, social is a great place to share your press coverage. It could be a great place to share it with your friends and family, but then also as you're talking to maybe recruits or people who are supporting your team, you can make sure that they also have a link to it, and you can also reference it word of mouth. As Gwen mentioned, press can really help you be part of that bigger strategy to set your credibility, show that you're real, show that you're serious about this space, and kind of bring that legitimacy to your program. GoFly's role. This is talking more to what we can do for you. So everyone in phase 2, all teams will receive a short press toolkit that includes these reminders for you to approach press. It also includes a short FAQ doc on some frequently asked questions about GoFly. Those should help you answer any basic questions about GoFly during interview processes. For anything super complicated, again, you can just pass that over to us, or let the reporter know you'll get back to them. We will make sure to send that out to everyone after this webinar, so you just have easy access there. Again, as you also might know, we have been reaching out to many of you to help share your story. The first way that we're doing that is sharing your story on our own earned channels and on the blog, on our own social channels. And we really use the information there to also kind of figure out what could be compelling for press. So you also know that for many of you, we've been starting to reach out and see if you would like us to help conduct some local press on your behalf. If you are ready, if you are prepared, if you feel comfortable with that. So you should continue to keep an eye out for that, because we'll be following up to make sure that you're all set there. Again, we want to be a resource for you, so hopefully this can help you feel confident to do your own outreach. If you do have any additional questions, you should feel free to contact us at press@gofly.com, or just leave us a note on the forum as usual. So I think that covers most of what we want to get through today. I know we have a few follow-up questions to get through and answer. And again, hope to hear from you soon on the forum. Turn it back over to you, Nidhi.
Thank you, Sarah. A question that we have is, how long does it take to get in touch with a reporter or a publication so that I can start the process of actually getting in their publication?
Perfect, yes. A really good thing to remember with press is that sometimes there's only one person working on one beat. So if you send an email, you might be used to instant email communications. It might actually take a few days or even a few weeks to get back to you. So you should not feel discouraged if you do not have an immediate response. You just should feel empowered to follow up with them, maybe after a few days or even a week, to see if they got your email. It could be a longer process depending on what type of publication you are speaking with. And on that note, the entire timeline of when you first pitch an idea to an end story could really vary. It could be very quick and the reporter's moving very fast. and it could be over the span of 1 week, or sometimes it's a longer term and it could be over more like several weeks to a month or two.
Next question is, should I ever sign a release or any kind of waiver from a reporter or a publication? Is there anything ever that they might ask me to sign when writing an article about me?
Great. Yes, great question. In my experience, that has almost never happened. It is exceedingly rare that a reporter will ask you to sign anything and will ask for anything very confidential. This really kind of relates to the whole on the record, off the record part of press. Again, you really want to make sure that anything that you say could be used in print, but again, you should not feel compelled to sign anything. If a reporter happens to ask you that, you can definitely reach out to GoFly at press@gofly.com. Oh, I'm sorry, goflypress.com, and make sure that we can help you vet that.
Great. I know you've mentioned this before in terms of sort of making sure that we keep our secret sauce to ourselves. But if you can just sort of walk us through again, is there anything that we shouldn't be saying during our interviews about ourselves, about GoFly, about our sponsors? What are sort of some alternative visuals maybe that we can offer if we don't want to give them something of our device? And then what if they say that they won't publish an article if they don't get a visual?
Great question. Yes. So visuals are often something that reporters will push for. They also do know that sometimes you can't necessarily get a visual. And really when they're asking for that, you should think of it as maybe not as a literal picture of your device, but something else that could help support the story. So some other examples of visual assets that you could offer are a headshot of yourself, a picture of the team, even maybe a picture of the workspace that you're working in. Something that I think people don't realize is it is exciting to know, are you working out of a university lab? Are you working out of a personal studio? Are you working out of a 2-car garage? All of those little details could be really interesting to press. So those types of visuals could really fulfill that need without having to necessarily give press a prototype or a picture of your device. If you feel comfortable enough that you think there is part of your device you could show that wouldn't necessarily give away the competitive edge that you are working toward, you can absolutely do that. Trying to make sure I covered all parts of that question. Did I miss any bits of that?
No, I think that was great. That really sort of covered everything when it comes to the visuals and what I should think about, what information I'm providing and what I can't. So if I get an interview, does that mean I get a story?
Also a great question. So in the communications world and public relations, just because you get an interview does not necessarily guarantee an article. Most of the time it does. Most of the time, if you've been able to tell a compelling story and convince the reporter that this is something worth telling, they will end up writing a story about it. However, there are instances where you might get on the phone and the reporter decides they actually don't have enough room to run the story. They don't have enough time. Sometimes stories can be almost completely finished, but could be just cut last second because of an editor's decision. And sometimes they just feel like this might not have been enough of a compelling story to tell. That all should not come as a surprise. It's okay if sometimes you lose a story that way, but you should not think of it as a guaranteed thing. Something that could help you in that is really just following up with the reporter to ask, did you get everything you need? Is there a question you want to develop? Or is there anything else that I could give you to try to help that story come along and really convince the reporter that your story is worth telling?
And can I ask for pre-approval on an article?
Yes, you may. Again, when you're following up the reporter, you can see if it's possible for them to send you a copy of the article to make sure that it's all correct. I will state that many reporters kind of find that a little bit pushy sometimes. So while you can ask for it, it's not very likely that they're going to give you those approval processes beforehand. That being said, reporters are very, do understand the value of being accurate, obviously. So if there is an article that comes out and there is an inaccuracy or something is factually incorrect, they would appreciate you following up with them to correct that. And most times they will make that correction, whether if it's in print, obviously that's harder, but if it is digital and online, usually that's a pretty easy fix.
Okay, so if they do get something wrong, I am able to address it.
Yes, yes. In fact, I would say that reporters might even appreciate that, to say, hey, you know, here's a little bit more clarity on that, and here's the correct, you know, even misspelling names sometimes, it's totally fine to follow up with, and they will expect that.
Great. What if a reporter or a press outlet asks us a question about GoFly? How should we address that?
Great. So we will send you that press kit or that toolkit that will give you a short list of some information on how to answer basic questions about GoFly, and really how we as GoFly as a organization talk about ourselves. That being said, if they happen to ask you anything specific to the technical guidelines or anything a little bit more complicated that you either don't know the answer to or don't really feel comfortable speaking about, you can always tell the reporter that you will either get back to them or that that is a better question for GoFly as a competition. We are more than happy to jump in for you. If you want to flag that to us and let us know, we can always follow up with the reporter to give them the information they need.
Okay, great. Sarah, I think that's all the questions we have for now. We will follow up, as Sarah mentioned, with the additional materials so that Phase 2 teams have access. If there are any other questions, as always, please reach out to us at info@goflyprize.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.